Hello, my name is Annie Macmanus, and I'm going to read you a little bit from my book, Mother. It is from chapter 8, which is called Mary 1999. Mary, I thought that was you. His face was beetroot red with a glossy sheen, his hair matted down over his forehead. Even in her loose state, she could see that he was very drunk. He swayed slowly, fixing his eyes on her boobs with a serious expression. Jesus Christ, Mary, you look amazing. Don't sound so surprised, Danny Donnelly. That was Louise, who swooshed by them, a blur of blonde. Mary laughed. Thanks, Danny. Happy birthday, I got you a card. He handed her an envelope. She took it off him and put it in her handbag, then looked back up, blushing. Thanks, Danny. That's very kind of you. Will we get you a drink? Come on, it's your birthday. He grabbed her hand and led her through the crowds to the trestle table in the corner. Once they were there, she leaned against the table to hold herself steady. She felt like she had just got off a boat onto dry land. She focused on the straight line of the table underneath her hands. I'll have a Coke, please, she said nonchalantly to Danny. They stood side by side, facing the dance floor, and gulped their drinks down. Danny turned to look her up and down, and she stayed staring outwards at the writhing bodies. There was nothing to say. The DJ spoke into the mic, his voice smooth and practiced. Okay, everybody, time for the slow set. This is where you grab somebody and squeeze them tight. The room was even darker now, and Danny turned to her, a grave expression on his face. Want to dance, Mary? She took his arm like she had seen Louise do with Mickey. She realised she was exactly the same height as him and silently thanked Louise for telling her to wear her Converse. They walked through the bodies and he pulled her round to face him. A voice rang around the room, nasal and earnest, singing of seeing people in dreams and of not wanting to miss a thing. She felt Danny's arms encase her and press her tightly up to his chest. She could smell his sweat and aftershave. She forced herself to put her arms over his shoulders, and when she did, she could feel his hands running up and down her back until one of them rested on her bum. It sat there heavy on her buttock like a dead weight. Now his tongue was thick and squirming in her mouth. The words were still ringing out around the hall, singing about the moment and wanting to stay in it forever. She forced herself to keep her mouth open. She pulled away eventually and rested her head on his shoulder. She saw Louise's face flash past her, sparkling and exuberant as she was dragged somewhere by Mickey. Louise gave her a comedic double thumbs up. Mary willed herself to feel the importance of it all. She squeezed her eyes shut as Danny's hands roughly kneaded her right breast. It hurt. She felt something pressing on her groin area and had the stomach-sinking realization that his penis was erect. He whispered in her ear, "Let's get out of here." He gripped her hand so tight that her fingers pressed together painfully. She could feel her heart drumming in her chest as he pulled her through the dark shapes of intertwined bodies and crashed them through the fire exit and down a set of steps to the playing field below. The air was cool on her face, and she tried to breathe it in deeply as he pulled her along. She heard giggles from the darkness in the distance. Where are we going? Somewhere no one can see us. They walked to the corner of the field where it was coal black. She could just make out a small triangular red flag signposting the corner of the playing pitch. He turned to her and grabbed her head in his two hands and thrust his tongue into her mouth. His hands were frantically searching her body. They squeezed her boobs roughly, then kneaded her bum, then moved up between her legs. Then she was on the ground. Afterwards she didn't remember how she had got there, but she did remember him roughly pulling up her dress around her waist and pulling her pants down to her knees. She did remember the heavy weight of his penis in her hand, surprisingly thick and short. She did remember fuck's sake, as he fumbled to find her vagina. She did remember him pulling her legs apart and thrusting until he was inside her, and she did remember the feeling of pain then, and his panting, and that feeling like the most disgusting thing, his sour breath right in her mouth. She did remember the long, drawn-out groan that came out of him and the feeling of something wet and dripping around her thighs. She did remember him rolling off her to lie on his back on the ground. She did remember the feeling of queasiness coming over her like a thick fog, her stomach lurching and her retching into the grass. She did remember him asking her was she all right over and over again, and her telling him to fuck off. She did remember his legs walking away from her, his hands pulling up his flies as he walked, and his face lit up pale and gormless in the moonlight as he turned to look back at her. Louise found her in the bathroom, bent over the sink, trying to wash her face as reams of drunken girls clambered around each other to get a glimpse of themselves in the mirror. "Well, you've got a lot to tell me about," she said, eyes wide, searching Mary's face for clues. "Jesus, Mary, the state of your face. Let's get you home." Mary felt like she was going to be sick again any second, so she sat in the back of the taxi with her eyes closed and the window open, head flopping from side to side. Louise held her hand tightly and promised her she'd ring her the next day. Late into the night, Mary sat cross-legged on her bed, feeling hyper-awake. She couldn't brush the taste of the vomit out of her mouth. There was a dull throb of pain between her legs. She rubbed her sticky thighs and touched her fingers to her lips. She gulped water hungrily from a bottle. She unzipped her bag and pulled out the envelope Danny had given her earlier on that night. It was a card with a bunch of pastel flowers on the front. She opened it up. "To Mary. Happy birthday. From Danny." She stared at it for a long time and fell asleep, her knees curled up to her chin.